Okay, we are going to get going. Thank you for joining another SDEC session. My name is Adam Greco, and I will be helping kind of moderate behind the scenes. Stu, you want to get our slides up and running here?
I am working on that.
uh, While we're doing that, for those of you who are new to the SDEC, we are a free educational community around digital analytics and digital marketing. Um, we are about 4,000 people right now. We're closing in on 4,000. We've got about 75 people to go. That's my next milestone before we go for the big 5,000. So if you know of anyone who wants to join the SDEC, or if you're listening in on this and you're not yet a member, it's free. I'll put some information in the chat on how you can join. These are the 12 topics that we cover. We try to get to as many of these topics as we can, and we look for speakers that are good, knowledgeable people. So if you know of anyone that you would like to have present, you can DM me or email us at sdec@searchdiscovery.com. The cool part about having almost 4,000 people in the group is it gets people's attention when we ask them to come present for us. Okay, next slide. So one other note I want to let you know, we do have an SDEC Slack group. Unfortunately, we only have about 66% of our members in the Slack group, which means that many of you are missing out on the opportunity to view 50 past webinars, DM your fellow associates in the field, and check out job postings. We have a new URL that makes it really easy to join the Slack group. So I've put it here, and I'm also going to put it in the chat as well. It's just a quick rebrandly join SDEC, and I just pushed that into the chat. So we do ask that you join the SDEC first before you join the Slack group, because if you skip that step, then we don't know which topics you want to be invited to webinars for. Okay, next slide. One little reminder, since this is an Adobe Analytics related topic, there is the Adobe Summit coming up soon, and this is a worldwide one instead of the past where there's been kind of US and Europe. So it's April 27th and through the 29th, and it is free this year. So if you want to learn more about Adobe Analytics, you can definitely register and join the Adobe Summit. You do have to have an Adobe login because it uses your Adobe Experience Cloud login. And then for those of you who are attending, I am actually going to be doing a session at Adobe Summit on some new technology that we have built at Search Discovery called Apollo that helps you actually improve and manage your Adobe Analytics implementation. I've had a bunch of people ping me and ask me about what I'm working on and what Stu is working on as well. And so we're doing a session at Adobe Summit where you can actually see a live demo of the technology. So it's S316 if you register. Love to talk to you, see you there. Okay, and then the next slide before we hand it over to Stu, if you have questions during the Stu session, if it's a technical issue or something about the SDEC, you can use the chat and I'll be looking for those questions. But if it's related to the topic that Stu is presenting, please use the Zoom Q&A, and that way we'll get to all the questions at the end. So that's it. I will now hand it off to Stu to talk about XDM.
Thanks, Adam. I am Stuart Schilling. I am a solutions architect at Search Discovery, and I'm primarily focused on building and furthering the Apollo product. I'm also the product owner for Data Layer Manager and Product String Builder and a number of pretty much all the launch extensions that are out there. So we have been working with this new thing presently called the AEP Web SDK extension. This is the enabling technology for launch that is helping people to communicate to the new Adobe Edge network. And it has some great promise of reducing your need for other extensions, consolidating all the communication between the Experience Cloud products, Adobe Analytics, Target, Audience Manager, and also AEP and a new technology called Launch Server Side. So this is something that you should be making some plans for in the next months and years to get yourself onto this newer technology. And so I want to start with a little bit of the breakdown of the old and the new, because it's not just the AEP Web SDK extension. It's kind of a whole new ecosystem. And there's stuff that you might be used to today that you're going to be divesting. And there's stuff that you're going to find totally new. And so some of it, like, I just want to kind of get some of this out there on the table before we jump in and look at a couple working examples of AEP Web SDK in action, sending data through to Adobe Analytics. So the data flow. So this is two examples of old and new. So this top one is kind of the old or present data flow, where you might have a data layer push that's adding something to your data layer. You would have a data layer manager, which is responding to that thing being added, which then triggers a launch rule. At any rate, you're going to have a launch rule, and that launch rule is typically using the Adobe Analytics extension to set variables, and then on your S object. And then we use the Adobe Analytics product string builder to set product strings up. And then finally, you're going to send a beacon. And you're sending this beacon just as you've sent beacons since the Omniture days. Essentially, underneath this send beacon action within launch is an s.t or s.tl call, which prepares that beacon and sends it across the wire out to an Adobe Analytics collection server. And you're probably used to seeing 102.207.net or something.omtrdc.net or your own CNAME on top of that collection server. But essentially, we are building beacons and sending them directly to Adobe Analytics. So in the new environment, everything here is the same as far as the way that we're architecting solutions. We still have data layer pushes. We still have the same data layer. We have data layer manager that is responding to those things being pushed. And then we have a rule that's going to be triggered. So the same event, the same rule, perhaps. And then we use the AEP Web SDK to send an event. And this event goes to the Adobe Edge network. And you're going to see, like, if you look in your network tab, you're going to see edge.adobedc.net or a CNAME that represents the same endpoint. Once the data gets there, depending on your configuration, it may then be sent along to the Adobe Analytics collection server as a beacon. So the difference here is that we're sending an XDM object here, which is going to look like a JSON or a RESTful API call. And that ends up on the edge. And then we have a beacon that is going up to the Adobe Analytics collection server, just as if it had come out of here. So what's old and new with extensions? So in that configuration on the top, we would have had the ECID service. We would have had the Adobe Analytics extension. We would have had the product string builder, and we would have had the core extension and data layer manager. Airbrake is here just because I always have it on all my implementations, but it doesn't really pertain to this discussion so much. In the new, we still have the core extension, just as we would before. We still have data layer manager, just as we would before, but we have this new AEP Web SDK extension, and we have this, which is something that we've produced at SDI called XDM Composer, which kind of fills in the gaps of a lot of the common use cases and things that you want to do with AEP Web SDK. AEP schema. This is totally new. You probably haven't had to deal with this in the past. unless you are dealing with or doing stuff within AEP. And the AEP schema, there's some words in here that you're going to see as new as well. So sandbox, this selection here, and I'm in Experience Platform here, which might be platform.adobe.com that got me to this page. You have sandboxes, which are virtual environments. So you can have your production sandbox, and everything here is housed within that sandbox. And you may have other sandboxes where you can do development work or do staging stuff and be isolated from your production environment. You have schemas. So this is a schema, this whole thing. And then the schemas have mix-ins, which add these fields to the base schema, which is called a schema class. And these are just terms that you're going to see again and again and again. This hopefully gives you a little bit of a mental framework for them as you see them, so that you can know where to go to research them further. AEP edge configurations. So this is a new thing too. Within the AEP Web SDK extension, there is a place where you're going to need to specify your edge configuration. Within launch, there's a new dropdown. So this is what you're used to seeing, is this client side with properties and rules and data elements and extensions and whatnot, and environments. So you have development environments, production environment, staging environment, and you progress from development to staging to production as you promote your code out. The edge configuration is managed within launch, but you have to click this little drop down to get to it. You create an edge configuration, and that edge configuration is going to have environments that parallel the environments in launch. And the reason that we have these is so that when we're working within a launch development property, it will align to the edge configuration for development or production or for staging, depending on which environment launch is running in. You'll see these environment IDs, and there's kind of a cryptic key here, and then there's a suffix. So :dev, :prod, :stage. This is the short name of the environment. But this key is the same across all of them. So we can say my edge configuration is this thing with this common key, and then the environment for my edge configuration is prod or stage or dev. So I'm going to click into the next page. We're going to look at an edge configuration and give us an idea of what it is, what it does. So here is my edge configuration called Stew 7 Goats 3/8/2021. And it has this environment ID. So this is staging. And the friendly name is staging. Here's that short name. And then within this edge configuration, this is kind of like a traffic cop, a little bit of a router. So from the client, from the AEP Web SDK, we're going to be sending XDM. And here's what XDM looks like. It looks like a JSON object, because it is. And we're sending this thing in on the URL. Like if you look in the network tab, it's going to say config ID, and the config ID is going to match this, or actually whatever config ID is in that URL is going to dictate which edge configuration and environment you're going to be referencing. So this package, this bit of information, all this stuff is coming up to the Adobe Edge, and we line it up with an edge configuration, and that edge configuration can do things like saying, I have enabled Adobe Analytics for this edge configuration, and I'll create beacons and forward them over to this report suite. And this can be multiple report suites if you want, but you can add report suites here. But essentially, yeah, you send XDM, it has a config ID, it aligns with this thing, and then this acts as a set of rules as far as where the thing is going to go next. So XDM in, Adobe Analytics beacon out. We can turn on Audience Manager, which basically just sets up your destination settings. Experience Platform, so we can send this XDM directly to the AEP data lake. Target, we can turn that on. It's going to have your client ID and your environment ID and client code, or a few parameters to set up target. And this thing is going to come in here, and it is going to be sent up to target. And then depending on your settings, if you said that I want this thing to render experience events, target experiences, then you're going to see target experiences coming back to the browser to be rendered by the Visual Experience Composer. And then finally, launch server side. So that's another place that we can send this data. And what's nice is that we're sending one piece of data. So one common beacon, if you will, is getting sent up to the edge, and then the edge config is determining where to send it next, where to syndicate that information. We're going to jump into a couple examples. And the first example that we're going to talk about is something fairly simple. And I just want to kind of give you a little bit of an architecture, how we set this up. So remember, we're starting with a data layer push. So I'm just showing you what that data layer push looks like. We have an event, product added to cart, and then some product information, product ID, name, brand, SKU, some price information, and a quantity. And by pushing that to the data layer, we're going to trigger a rule in launch, which has the name, product added to cart, AEP XDM send. And the extension that we're going to use is AEP Web SDK with a data element type of an XDM object. I'm sorry, I don't think that needs to be there. So anyway, we're in this rule. It was triggered by a data layer manager, data layer push with the event of product added to cart. And our action on this rule is going to be a send event provided by the AEP Web SDK. And this send event action takes a parameter, XDM data. And XDM data is a place where you're going to provide a data element which is going to provide the XDM object which will be sent. And so this is a data element reference to a data element that we've named XDM product added to cart. And this data element is provided by the AEP Web SDK. Data element type is XDM object. It's going to return an XDM object. And then finally, within this product information is an array. And so we need to construct a thing called product list items, which is part of the commerce mix-in within AEP. And we've created a data element, product list items, for product added to cart. The extension we're going to use is XDM Composer, and the data element type is mapped array, and it's going to return an array of objects. So at this point, I'm going to jump out of the presentation. We're going to jump into launch and a few things. So here's our demo store, and what we want to do is we want to kind of dig in and see what happens when I click this. So when I click add to cart, we have a rule, product added to cart, XDM send fired. And then we have alloy request, sending request, and we dig in here, XDM commerce, product list ads with a value of 1, and we have product list items with a SKU and a name, and then some other information that we've added into the schema, brand, name, price type, and product added to cart, product units added with a value of 1. So we're representing that one of this item was added to the cart. And you might be more familiar seeing the same thing. And let's clear this again. looking like this, where we're just sending, this is the equivalent beacon where we would be sending SC add event 6 to capture the quantity added, a product ID, price type, the product name, the SKU, and some other information. So basically product string in a beacon versus an XDM event that's being sent out to the Adobe Edge. So digging in here, let's go straight to that rule. And this is product added to cart, XDM send. And it's pretty straightforward. So we trigger it with a data layer event, and the action is AEP Web SDK send event. This is where I said that we have XDM data, and this is a data element we're calling XDM product added to cart. And so let's jump in and take a look at that data element. So this is where things are going to get a little bit strange, because this is a new data element type. We've never seen this before. The data element type is XDM object. And so XDM objects must conform to the schema that we've defined within AEP schema registry. And so here we've selected our sandbox. So which virtual space within AEP do we care about? And we selected a specific schema. And based on this selection, this structure is returned for us to set things against. Here's our commerce product list adds with a value of 1. So this is basically SC add. And here's our product list items, which is provided by another data element, which is going to return an array of objects. So I'm going to pause on this. We're going to jump into the schema because I think that you might want to see that. So Experience Platform, we're in our production sandbox, and I can go to schemas, and I'm just going to type in goat here, and here's the schema that I built last night. And so this is where we go to define what the schema looks like, where the data goes, essentially. And so within product list items, we have the base information, product list item, SKU ID, currency code, and that's provided by this commerce details mixin. So this is a piece of, it's a sub schema, if you will, that we apply on top of the base schema of XDM experience event. And on top of that, we're providing our own details that are not otherwise provided. So we're saying, and this is search discovery, but this would be your company ID, whatever it is. We're adding in product brand, product category, product name, and product price, price type. And we're adding these other nodes, which are event nodes, essentially. So when product is added to cart, we want to be able to count how many units were added, and when product was removed from a cart, we want to know how many units were removed. And that's kind of the way that we build up this schema to accommodate the data needs of our implementation. So back into Adobe Launch, and we're still looking at this data element for the XDM product added to cart. And the way I think about this is I say, when the product is added to cart, what do I want to represent within or as XDM? And so I want to represent that product list adds happened, so SC add, and I also want to represent a product list. So we're going to go take a look at this. Wouldn't it be nice if you could hot link from this into the reference data element? I don't know why that never occurred to me before, but that would be nice. So here is a product list items, product added to cart. This is the name of our data element. It's provided by, the data element type is provided by XDM Composer, and it's a mapped array. And here's the way that we do it. So basically we're saying, give me an object. We're pulling it straight from the data layer, and give me an array within that object. So the path to the array. So we're going to iterate on this array. So basically it's product 1, product 2, product 3, product 4. And for each iteration, we're going to look for product info.product ID. We're going to map that into name in the destination array. And product info.name is going to map to underscore search discovery.product.name. Quantity maps to this specific key within the destination. Product info.SKU becomes SKU, product info.brand. So what we can do is we can flexibly map out of existing arrays that we might have, arrays of objects, into specific spots within the XDM array of objects. So this thing is going to return, and I can just tell you what it's going to return. We'll come out here, and I'm just going to do a satellite get var on that. And so that returned an array with a single item, and these keys should match pretty much with the things that we had shown here. Okay, so what else happens here? Let's pop back into this extension. I think that's it, but let's just take a look at it one more time. So we press the button. That would have caused a data layer push, which pushed this product added to cart with these products, this one product, which would have triggered this rule, which would have used the AEP XDM send event, which causes this thing to be sent. And finally, here we go. Here's our commerce product list items and our comma product list ads.value1 and product list items with the values that we wanted to be set there. Is it working? So we have the Adobe Experience Platform debugger. So this is kind of a new thing that you might not have seen before. And I'm signing into this because it wants to know some things about my company and my account. And I'm going to go straight to, it says not connected, reload. I reload this page. And now it's attached to the page that I'm on. I'm just going to watch the logs. And client logs are pretty much the stuff that you're going to see in your console. There might be more stuff there, but this is where it gets more interesting. So this is the edge log, and this is basically, we're doing an edge trace. So we can see as we send information to the edge, and I just loaded a page, there's the request that was received. And we can also see the analytics mapping. So we're mapping to this report suite, and we've mapped certain query params or XDM paths into values on that beacon. And just for final cleanup, we just sent that event to represent a product added to cart, and here it is on the edge, and then here it is going over to Adobe Analytics, and then here in our real time, that was go-to. There's our go-to that we just sent along. So let's see, time check. I'm going to give myself another few minutes to rip through the rest of this, and then we'll get to questions. So the second use case that I wanted to demonstrate here, or at least talk through, is the merging of XDM objects. And so what we have is we have this task of merging event information. So as a page is loading, we might have an event that's page load started, and it provides information about the page. We have an event product viewed, which provides information about the product on the page, and event user detected, which is providing information about the user that's experiencing this page. And then finally, this page load completed event, which acts as a trigger or a bookend to page load started to say, let's pack all this stuff up and let's send it across. And so the way that we do this is we use the XDM Composer's action stage XDM partial. And what we're doing here is we are maintaining an array on your AEP Web SDK instance. And you can specify which instance you're using, but we create this array XDM Composer partials, and this action, clear XDM partials, basically just clears this array. Stage XDM partial is going to push whatever XDM object you give it onto that array. And so in that scenario, page load started, we detect the event, we clear the array, and we stage the page info. Then on the next one, product viewed, we're going to stage the product info. And so now we have this array, which has two items on it, page info and product info. And then we do user detected. So we're going to stage the information about the user. So we've got three things here. And then finally, on the last step, so page load completed is triggering this rule. And what we do is we use the AEP Web SDK send event, and we're going to provide it here with its XDM data. It's the data element that we provide is a special kind of data element. So this data element is provided by XDM Composer, and the data element type is merged XDM partials. So essentially what it's going to do is it's going to take all three of those pieces of information, page information, product information, user information, which exists right now as partial or individual pieces of XDM, and we are merging those into one piece of XDM. And we can kind of see here, the data layer has this information that we just reviewed. The XDM partials array would have information from the first three events, or however many events, called stage XDM partial. And then finally, on page load completed, if we do a get var, we're going to see that this data layer information was converted into XDM objects and then merged together into a single XDM object. And we're using a deep merge here so that even if we have common keys within some of these objects, we're going to merge them all together. And so let's just take a quick look at this happening. And it happens on page load. So let's load this page. So this is a product detail page. And we can kind of see here, here's our data layer with the three events, or the four events. And we can see XDM Composer clear the partials, stage partial. So we're staging here the page information and stage partials. Here we got two events here. There's whoops, sorry, this is just the console representing whatever the most current state of that array is, no matter where it was in time. But essentially we're seeing that we have this information in there. And let's take a look at that data element that we're using on page load completed. So page load completed uses this merged XDM partials data element, and we'll just evaluate that in the console to see what that looks like. And it should look exactly like what we sent here. So here's commerce. We have product views, a value of 1. So that's a prod view event essentially. And then product list items, which has our product in there. Web is details about the page itself. And then finally, user details. We had to add this into the schema because it didn't exist elsewhere, or we didn't find it Um, so, so there you go. And yeah, so we should have all sorts of good information. Let's get a few. Let's actually look at the cart because that'll be even more interesting when we look at that merged set of events. So here we've got all 4 products, and a product list views is our event, which is the SC view. And there you go. So that was a lot, but I didn't have much time, so hope you found value for money, and I'll open it up for questions.
Okay, thanks, Stu. We do have a lot of questions, so we'll probably do power round of questions here. If you have any other questions, please post them to the Q&A, and ones we don't get to later. Today, we'll see if we can maybe answer after the fact. So, top question. It would be good to understand what advantages this approach offers versus how things function today. What business value does it provide? Also, will users be required to modify their implementations to use XDM? Some folks in my company are still complaining about the mandated move from DTM to launch.
A lot of these questions are probably for an Adobe rep and not a consultant in the field. But the value that you're going to get from, so it's like, why would I want to do this? Why would I want to move to AEP Web SDK? And the value that I see in it is, first of all, it is a single library, which has been shown to be like 80% faster than using the individual libraries. So using ECID and Adobe Analytics and Target or AT.js. So one, speed. So it's lightweight on the client and it's blazing fast. It's also a lot faster, a lot more efficient from the standpoint of network calls. So you're communicating for all of your Experience Cloud products through one interface to the edge and back, as opposed to having a bunch of calls out to individual solutions. And on top of that, in order to have all those calls to individual solutions, you need to download libraries that enable you to talk to those community or to those solutions. So speed is going to be one of those benefits. The just the stability of it, I think, is going to be the other benefit. It's a lot cleaner. So, they've taken a lot of acquisition. So Adobe acquired Omniture, they acquired Offermatica, they acquired CQ, they acquired all these companies, and they acquired the technologies with those companies, and they've been, up until the advent of this new client-side implementation methodology, they've been basically implementing in silos and doing some pretty tech debt heavy orchestration between the things. So I think things are just going to work better. Beyond that, there are privacy controls which are included in XDM. So as you start looking at privacy more seriously, there's actually a hard opt-out, or forced opt-in that you can do, which it won't send a beacon. It won't send anything until you've explicitly opted in. And after that point, when you have opted in, it was actually, holding in a queue the things it was going to send, the interactions it was going to do. And once you opt in, then it kind of releases that queue and lets things happen. And I'm going to say one more thing. So if you want to get to AEP as the data lake and use things like CJA and a lot of the really cool new stuff, you're going to have to feed it this way. And if you want to use launch server side, which is going to offer the promise of taking a lot of third-party beacons, like third-party pixels and stuff, off of your client and putting them onto the edge. That's a huge performance benefit. Then you're going to need to go this way. I don't think that they're going to force anyone to stop sending beacons, but I think that the Adobe is internally motivated toward this new platform, and they are going to be quicker to respond to anything that has to do with this new infrastructure, as opposed to stuff that is, the aging infrastructure that they're wanting to divest.
Okay. Next question. You showed a couple tools here, Data Layer Manager and XDM Composer, some extensions that you've built on behalf of Search Discovery. Are those required? Is there a, what are the stuff that you showed today could be done with the free version versus paid version?
Everything that I showed with Data Layer Manager is doable with the free version. Honestly, it's doable without Data Layer Manager, but we created Data Layer Manager for a reason, to streamline and standardize the way that we interact with Launch. So if you certainly can do, like, all you need to do is be able to trigger a rule, and I showed Data Layer Manager doing that triggering of the rule and managing the data from the data layer that's used by the other data elements. But yeah, I mean, you certainly don't need Data Layer Manager. XDM Composer is doing the things that 2 months ago I was doing in custom code, and to this day, I think Eric Matisoff in his demos is doing in custom code. So I've taken the common tasks, the things that you you tend to have to do one way or the other, and eliminated the need to use custom code to do it. And XDM Composer is also free.
Okay. Next question. What's the best way to migrate to this? The data layer doesn't seem to change, and launch triggers don't change. So does launch just get configured to additionally send data via XDM to a dev report suite that can have its results compared to the current traditionally collected data?
So yeah, getting to this, in the example that I showed, the data layer did not change because we built a data layer which we had the foresight of saying that this data layer should support, both XDM and the traditional implementation. So it's structured well, or it's well suited to do it. If you are still using, a W3C static data layer on a site that is more event driven, like a spa application, single page app, or a site with islands of single page app functionality, you might be struggling with representing those events, and you might want to rethink how you do a data layer anyway. What I think as the migration flow would go is that you're going to want to look at what you're collecting now. So what variables are you collecting? Look at your SDR, make sure that it's fully up to date, make sure that everything that you're collecting is really worth collecting. So rationalize that SDR and match up your implementation to real business requirements. So you should have an answer. You should be able to answer, why am I collecting this? Like, for every variable and every event. Having done that, and that's a necessary step, you now have the information to build the schema. So you need to go into schema registry and define, how is this information going to be communicated in XDM? Where's it gonna land in XDM? Where should it, or where must it be within an XDM object that's being sent? And then from there, you kind of back up and say, well, how do I send these things? What events are going to trigger sending them? What we've done in Apollo, because that's a big question that we're looking to answer in Apollo, is that we'll map an existing implementation. So we'll look at the report suite, we'll pull in all the information about it, and then map that into business requirements, which then maps to both data layer paths as well as XDM paths. And we build that schema automatically. And then we also build out the launch property that will populate or send those XDM objects. What was the second part? Something about report suite?
Yeah, I think unfortunately we are out of time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to document all of these questions because they're coming in faster than you can answer them. And I'll put them into a document and we'll see if we could post some answers when you have time to get to them, Stu, in the Slack group, because there's a lot of really good questions in here. So I'm going to let everyone go now, but I wanted to thank everyone for joining. And Stu, thank you so much. Obviously, there's a lot of interest in this topic in the Adobe world, as we could see by the questions. We will post a recording in the Slack group. We'll post these slides in the Slack group, and whenever we can, we'll post the answers to the Q&A. But Stu, thank you so much for starting the conversation on this crazy topic.
You are more than welcome. Happy to do it.
Okay, thanks everyone. Have a good rest of the week.